If you're looking to capture a bit of the West Coast lifestyle, consider talking to Matt Gull about this neighborhood.
Just across the channel is the Eagle Harbor Yacht Club.
Yeah.
Over there is one of the tiny little club.
Of course, you'll need to be a discerning buyer with access to money, lots of money.
This is $8 million,
Yeah.
5360, 5340, asking 22.8 million. The recent sold in Seaside Place last week, $22.7 million.
Welcome to West Vancouver and a gated neighborhood called Seaside Place.
Waterfront is dramatically increasing and not enough supply and a huge demand.
Seaside Place is on the high end of property values in West Van, a municipality on the high end of property values in Canada. The average house price here is more than $3 million. This is the place people think of when you mention the federal riding of West Vancouver, Sunshine Coast, sea-to-sky country. But not so fast. There's a lot more to the riding than West Van. To get the feel of this place, you need to get on the road and head north. If you can get out of West Van, that is. Transportation routes are frequently clogged up. The Sunshine Coast part of the riding is accessed by ferry from Horseshoe Bay. Past the ferry terminal and up the highway from West Van is Squamish, and then about an hour later, Whistler. And it's voters in these fast-growing areas outside of West Vancouver that may determine who becomes the next MP.
It is a traditional Liberal-Tory swing seat, but if you look at where the Greens and the NDP have been in the past, if you put them together, they're a strong contender with the Tories and the Liberals. They never get as high as the best year for the Liberals or the Tories, but in a race that's close between the Liberals and Tories, a combined Green and NDP vote would be very strong.
Hey, welcome, have some corn. Don't be shy, just come and have some. I'm Mike.
Mike Simpson is running for the Green Party. The Greens won 22% of the popular vote in 2019 and did well here in a recent provincial election.
Look around you, you'll see a huge number of young people who have moved into Squamish as the recreation capital. There's climbing, there's rock climbing, biking, there's all kiting, windsurfing, there's all sorts of stuff going on here. And basically when you see that demographic change and you see a community move from a resource-based community, which was logging, to suddenly dependent on tourism and the kiting community, or like I said, there's how many rock climbers are you going to meet walking up and down the street today? As communities shift like that, we see their values also shift. And what I think we're seeing now is a much more sophisticated, well-educated group of people or community who actually are wanting a quality of life in here. So they do want affordable housing. They do want intergenerational housing.
The forest industry still plays a part in the economy of this area, but many of the mills have shut down and the equipment is sidelined. Tourism and service industries have taken over. This is the sort of place where people are constantly pulling out cameras and trying to capture the natural beauty. Sea-to-sky country isn't an understatement. For relative newcomers like Liam Hobbs, it's all about a work-life balance. He's a welder from Calgary who now lives in Squamish in a shared house with 3 other people. His election issue is pretty simple.
Just trying to make housing a little bit more affordable for everyone.
I just want to introduce myself quickly. My name is Patrick Weiler. I've been your member of Parliament for the last couple of years.
Okay.
And I'm just taking the time today to chat with folks about the upcoming election on the 20th of September.
Okay.
And I'm going to be running again with the Liberal Party to be your representative.
The incumbent in West Vancouver's Sunshine Coast sea-to-sky country is Patrick Weiler. In the last election, he handily beat his Conservative opponent.
The most significant challenge will come from the Conservative Party. In the past, this riding has flipped from Liberal to Conservative, and so I know there are pockets where it's rock solid base of support for the Conservatives. So what I need to do is really to be able to present the best plan to be able to that will be able to deliver on the issues that matter to people. A lot of traditional conservative voters are supporting me for things like the wage subsidy that saves so many businesses right across the riding. I'm very, I guess, fortunate relative to my opponents in this election, in that I'm familiar all across the riding, having both been the MP, but also having grown up between West Vancouver, Sechelt, and having worked in Whistler. And no other candidate has that connection. So I think it's something that is certainly an advantage for me.
This time, Weiler will face former Conservative MP John Weston. Weston declined to be interviewed for our program, but it seems even the Tory is going green.
I care about the environment. That's why people call me the Green Tory. And I wouldn't be running in this election if we didn't have an achievable environment plan. That plan puts an emphasis on personal responsibility through the low carbon savings account. It puts an emphasis on innovation. It suggests, as Navius Consulting, an international consulting firm, suggests, that we will meet or beat our Paris Accord GHG emission targets without destroying the economy. It's a good plan. It's achievable. It's why I'm voting Conservative. I hope you will too.
And then you've got the script that you'll be working with, which basically runs counter to the, runs alongside the Dandelion entry. Hi, my name is such and such. I'm from the Avi Lewis campaign. How are you?
Avi Lewis is the NDP candidate here. The documentarian and climate activist joins his father and grandfather in running under the NDP banner.
So I'm running for the NDP in the riding. Election's in a couple of weeks.
Yes,
we're getting out and talking to people about how they're thinking about voting. And a lot of people are just starting to concentrate on the election.
Yeah. Well, I vote NDP anyways. But.
Okay, cool.
I think the pandemic minority parliament was a great reminder of what the NDP can do in a minority government. My grandfather was across the floor of the House of Commons. David Lewis versus Pierre Elliott Trudeau in 72 to 74. A great minority parliament in which we got a publicly owned energy company, Petrocan. Imagine if we had that today, and we're trying to manage the decline of fossil fuels in a way that didn't sacrifice workers. We could lead with a public energy company. We had a national nonprofit housing strategy in that minority government, and we had the first. And we had the first financial election finance rules in that minority parliament. That was my grandpa versus Justin's dad, in the early 1970s. Fast forward to the pandemic, the NDP pushed hard for supports for people in the pandemic, got the CERB doubled, got the wage subsidy up from 10% to 75%. And at the doors, I'm finding people actually know that the NDP had the backs of working people during the minority parliament. And I'm really proud to run in that tradition. And I think it can be in a minority parliament, and it looks like we might be headed for another one. The NDP can play a very powerful role. On the other hand, politics is very volatile these days. With 2 weeks left, we could also win it. I don't think that's out of the scope. So we're working hard, and we're feeling good about it.
And then the Green vote this time around, it might be a lot more different because of the challenges of the Green Party's own organization. Its leader is not getting the kind of profile that, say, Elizabeth May had. It will be interesting to see what happens in the debate, but you just don't see Green support necessarily as strong this time around, although I think they can count on a kind of consistent base of people who want to vote Green, but maybe not this time around.
They don't necessarily have to vote Green to be Green inclined, right?
Right.
And I'm sure that's what the NDP are counting on.
Yeah, and I think that's it's interesting for a couple of reasons. One, because it's exposing a little bit the sort of factions within the Green Party. You have a kind of labor, social democrat side, and you have increasingly an environmental side. Avi Lewis is part of the forefront of that kind of green waffle, as it's been called,
in the NDP.
And so he's clearly representing that side of the NDP and hoping that that's where the support for the NDP is in this riding, as opposed to, as you said, in 2019, not getting a lot of support when they're in that more traditional NDP vote that they were looking for.
What issues are most important to you?
Climate, and economic recovery.
You seeing anybody that's resonating with you in terms of leaders?
Well, I see who's certainly not resonating with me, but I'm going to be looking a little bit more closely for the NDP and the Liberals. I want to see how the NDP and Liberals are going to be shaping up.
I'd like to see some real guts about matters of climate change, move toward a green economy. I'm tired of the same mealy-mouthed garbage, and nothing gets done. That's the worst part. Nothing gets done.
And which issues are most important for you?
I think the Aboriginal issues. I think it's a shame that after 30 years, there's still tribes that have boiled water advisories. So I think they should really take care of the Indigenous people.
The amount of money they're spending on things at the moment.
Like what?
Mostly what they spent all the money during COVID.
Oh yeah,
and just felt like they were throwing a lot of it around, trying to, curry favor with the electorate.
Has anybody resonated with you on a national stage?
At the moment, I'm pretty undecided. I've sort of, not to be pessimistic, but I sort of have issues with all of them and don't know which direction I'm going to vote.
What issues are the most important to you?
What's the most important?
Housing.
Pardon?
Affordable housing.
There you are. What else?
Integrity.
Integrity.
I don't think there's a lot there.
Yeah. Has anybody resonated with you on a national stage? Impressed you?
No.
No?
Not really.
What's going to help you decide who to vote for?
It's tough because they all make all these promises that they never seem to be able to keep. So I don't know. It's tough to say.
So what issues are most important to you?
I guess climate change would be number one. Due to the recent wildfires and the crazy heat wave we've had, that's definitely one of my main concerns.
Yeah. How about you?
I would say the same. I think climate change is something that a lot of the government officials don't take super seriously, and I think that they need to at this point. It's getting to the point where it's time is running out, so yeah.
I'm Eric Anderson, councillor with the District of Squamish and currently acting mayor. Squamish is a portal to the Pacific. And that is that there's only 3 ways to get to the Pacific for the country of Canada, and that's the Fraser River in the Lower Mainland, the Skeena and Prince Rupert and Kitimat up there, and then there's Squamish. It's not expendable in that portal role. We have a railway and highway connections. We're closely tied to the Port of Vancouver, but we suffer from harbour maintenance issues. We have not had a comprehensive dredging of our harbour since 1986. And that's shortly before the federal government pulled out of active involvement in harbour maintenance. And even our deep sea vessel facility, Squamish Terminals, is feeling the effects of, just a missing partner in the federal government, an active partner in challenges that not only affect the community, but its role as a portal for Western Canada, if you like. It's not only recreational boaters, but we have multiple demands on our harbour, and not least for safety. So this is one area of traditional federal role that we certainly would welcome renewed interest in on the part of Ottawa.
People living in West Vancouver also want a few things from Ottawa. Climate change, transportation, and affordability are the key issues. Even many dual-income professionals can't afford to buy in West Van.
We're the only municipality in the region that's lost population in the last 5 years.
How can federal policy improve some of the challenges you face?
Well, we definitely need the federal and provincial governments to be at the table when to invest in affordable housing, in particular below market rental, because even our rental rates are some of the highest in the country. And our professionals, like our policemen, our fire people, I guess I should say, the dentists, even doctors and lawyers can't afford to live here. So we need that partnership. Otherwise, it's a huge financial burden on a municipality that really doesn't have many funding options. Just by way of an example, we've undertaken on our own to build workforce housing in a pretty central location in our community. And by doing so, we're actually forfeiting kind of the opportunity cost of about $80 million on that property. But we see it as such a necessity, and it would be great if we could secure partnership funding from the other levels of government.
How many doors do you think you've hit so far?
Ooh, that's a good question. Probably about 2,000.
What are people telling you when you ask them what their issues are?
The issue I hear about most is on climate change. People are wanting to make sure that the government is continuing to take ambitious action on climate change. They're wanting to learn more about what we're doing. People are concerned with what's happened this summer with the heat dome in British Columbia, and whether that's for themselves or their kids or their grandkids. It's really the issue that's first and foremost in people's minds. I would also say that housing affordability. A lot of people, homeowners I talk to, not so much for them, but for their kids as well. Not being able to afford to live in the community that you grew up in is something that that is, more and more a fact of life for many folks in my generation. So that's been an issue that comes up pretty frequently. Reconciliation has been an aspect as well, particularly with the discovery of the 215 children buried by the Kamloops Indian Residential School, and people wanting to ensure that we're accelerating the work on reconciliation with Indigenous people. So those are a few of the issues I'm hearing, and there's always, depending on where you are, there's local issues that come up. Yesterday on the Sunshine Coast, the issue of access to water was particularly on top of people's minds because of stage 4 water restrictions. So it's been a lot of consistent stuff, but depending on where you are, a lot of the local issues come up too.
So we're in a corrupt, anti-democratic system of first past the post that allows people with 39% of the vote to have absolute power in our country. That needs to change. Until it changes, we're going to have vote splitting, strategic voting debates, people holding their noses. People shouldn't hold their nose in the voting booth. It's a sacred place where people should be voting with their heart and their head together. And so I think that we need structural changes in our democracy.
But at the same time, you're encouraging people to vote strategically, correct?
For me to win in this riding, we need to unite the progressive and environmental community together. And right now, there are two parties that have that offer, the Greens and the NDP. And I've had a tremendous response of Greens, former candidates, Green voters, even Green campaign workers who are coming over and saying, we got to vote for one climate champion in this race. We like the other guy, but there's clearly one campaign that has a lot more momentum, that has more resources, that doesn't have a party in turmoil, and that clearly has momentum going into the final stretch of the campaign.
It's a four-way race. That's what's so interesting about this this particular riding, is it's a four-way race in which each single candidate is claiming that they've got the Green territory. And I keep saying to each single one of them, well, if you want to be Green, then just come over. You can have my T-shirt. Just take my place. Run in my place if you want. Like literally, Avi, if he says Green, he's claiming that he's Green because he's had the LEAP manifesto. Thank you. The problem is that his party rejected it. Right, so here he is. He's, as an individual, very green. Same as John Weston. Individually, he's quite green, but the Conservatives have got a ridiculous target. 30% is basically game over, right? And so, like with Avi, for example, if you're going to say you're green, then your party needs to actually accept what you're saying, right? And they rejected. Then they said they were going to study it for 2 years, right? And they didn't even do that. So if you can't say no to fracked gas, this is the problem with the NDP. They will not say no to fracked gas. What we're saying is no to fracked gas, no to fossil fuel new infrastructure. We're with the International Energy Agency on this. Absolutely no new fossil fuel infrastructure. Yep. Shut down the LNG, shut down the pipeline. The TMX is the dirtiest oil in the world.
Both New Democrats and Greens know they're fighting for the same voters. And to convince Greens to vote NDP, the New Democrats have produced this video.
Hello, I'm David Suzuki.
Hello, I'm Alexandra Morton.
Singing praises to Avi Lewis are some of the strongest voices in the environmental movement.
Is to vote for Avi Lewis on September 20th.
Support Avi.
Donate to Avi.
Please, vote for Avi.
In the middle of the Harper government, the Liberals held that seat, right? So it is a swing seat. It's a seat that you know, the Liberals can win and the Tories can still win the government. And the Tories can win that seat and the Liberals can still win the government. But you know it's going to be a battleground. And usually the party that wins that seat wins the government.
Kind of a bellwether, I suppose.
Very much a bellwether. It just doesn't have the pattern of correctly picking the winner. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. They did last time.
What do you think the impact of Lewis running in that riding will be to the main parties?
I think it's very powerful. Like I don't think Avi Lewis has a lot of appeal to Conservatives and leaning Conservative voters. I think he'll have a lot of appeal to Greens, right? He's a key proponent of the Green New Deal, which Green voters are going to find very appealing, and so will Liberals. And so he's a very strong candidate to be able to pull together, not just to rally traditional Democrat voters, that would not be enough to win that seat, but to pull defectors in from the Greens and pull defectors from the Liberals.
The NDP's climate plan is 12 bullet points. I don't think that's a sufficient response to the greatest challenge the world's ever faced. Our climate plan is 72 pages. It's one of the most comprehensive in the world, and all the independent assessments of our climate plan versus the others have found ours to be vastly superior, because we're able to do it in a way that not only is going to mitigate emissions, but it's also going to allow us to create jobs, and that's really going to be the key going forward. And so I know Avi's a very well-known activist, but I come at this from an environmental law background. And even in the last few months, we've been able to bring in some of the most progressive legislation on environment in our country's history with the Net Zero Accountability Act. And what this is going to require is that all Canadian governments not only set ambitious climate targets, but also have a detailed plan and report on it regularly to meet it. So a lot of people don't know that, and so that's what I've been telling them at the doors. And really, that's what we need to make sure that Canada is going to continue to lead and thrive in a low-carbon world.
Hi, how are you? I'm Mike. I'm welcome. Have some corn. I'm basically the Green Party candidate, and I hope you'll think about voting Green. I'm basically going on a climate change, so these little guys can survive the planet. I've got a little kid myself. It's my big worry, right? Is how we're going to get through the next decades. Yeah. So anyway, you can get out any flavor you like. There's a washstand there, and then if you want to know more about us and the Green Party, there's a table. You can read all the stuff and sign up. And if you want to take a sign or anything, please do. It'd be awesome. That'd be great. Thanks.
I decided to run. I'll tell you why. Because I've been working on environmental issues for a long time in the nonprofit sector, and I was a filmmaker, and I would make films about what's going on in the world in different parts of the world. And there comes a point where you realize that actually time is running out. And that's the key thing that people need to understand about climate change is we don't have that many more elections left to be able to make the key decisions to stay under the threshold of 1.5. So everybody talks about 1.5 to stay alive. What they're talking about is the 1.5 degrees, that if we go over that, my child who's 9 years old has a very tough time getting to the end of the century, honestly. And where we're actually heading is what's called 3.5 degrees. And that's an inferno. And so when you're in the climate science and you're in the nonprofit sector, and I've been to the meetings and gone to the United Nations, and I've been to Paris, I've been there to see all, what's exactly going on. And our bottom line is we need decision makers today making the hard decisions to be able to keep us alive in the coming decades.
I'm not running for Premier of British Columbia. That's a very tough job with a lot of different pressures on it. And we're running in a federal election for what we do as a country and what the federal level of government can do, which in my view, the federal level of government is the only one with the power and the resources to change the landscape on which we have all of these debates at the local level, whether it's old growth, whether it's fossil fuel infrastructure. It's the federal government that needs to lead in the climate emergency, and that's why I'm drawn to federal politics. As far as differences within our party, we're a big tent. We're grown-ups. We have some respectful differences of opinion around policies, but fundamentally we're going in the same direction, which is climate justice. We need to have rapid and transformational action on the climate emergency, and it's not the only emergency we face. We've got other emergencies: housing, public health, transit, overdose crisis, and we need the feds to act, and we need them to act in the interest of working people. So the NDP is united on the fundamental values, and yeah, we have some debates around specific issues.
Jagmeet Singh. You can read about me. I'm Mike. I'm the Green Party guy. Hey. And here's how to vote early if you want. That's a really good thing. If you can, vote early, or tell other friends to vote early, because that's critical, right? If we make sure everybody gets. Not vote early. Yeah, it's really helpful if everybody gets out and you're voting green. Yeah. Anyway, I'm basically campaigning on climate change. It's sort of my thing. I've been working on it for quite a while, and I'm actually super worried because of what's happening. So I'm hoping that we have the Green Party has basically the biggest targets and the most aggressive targets on climate change, and I'm hoping that people will vote green, or at least throw their vote behind us, so that the other parties also shift a little bit our direction. That's the key thing. Yeah. I mean, I'm not pretending we're going to get into government this election, but I am saying to people that if we get more voices in there, it makes a big difference. And in this riding, we're pretty close.
Do you feel somewhat conflicted, though? Because a lot of what the Green Party stands for is very similar, particularly from a climate point of view, as what the NDP sits for. And I know this is a zero-sum game, and only one of you get to win. But do you feel somewhat conflicted by that, by kind of drawing support away from the Greens?
No, I don't. I don't feel conflicted. I think that a healthy Green Party is good for democracy, because I think people need choices. And I think we need proportional representation so that people can vote their conscience. We can have more parties, and parties can compete in elections and cooperate in government, which is actually what voters want. Given that we live in a first-past-the-post system, we just have to get rid of this bi-party system that we've had in this country since the beginning of it. And an elected NDP government, the NDP is the only party, apart from the Liberals and the Tories, that has a chance of forming government or holding the balance of power in a minority. And we have proven that we can defend the interests of working people, and I'm laser focused on that. And we can tip the scales in favor of people and the planet. We're not going to do it by splitting the vote in this riding. So my job is to unite people and get to Ottawa.
We were talking earlier inside about how the area has changed. How has it changed?
Well, particularly there's a lot of young families moving into the riding. I mentioned that the Sunshine Coast is one of the oldest demographics, but given the...
and West Van, I would think, would be old as well,
it's
right?
Fairly, yeah, it's trends a little bit more elderly as well. But Squamish is one of the youngest communities in British Columbia, one of the fastest growing, a lot of young families moving there. But similarly, it's same things happening on the Sunshine Coast. People that are priced out of the market in Vancouver are moving there. So a lot of young families there, a lot of people that are very interested in our plan for $10 a day daycare, which is going to make a huge difference.
Well, that was my next question. Is the new people moving into the riding, do they benefit you or a candidate for another party?
It remains to be seen. I would anticipate that it would benefit myself and the Liberal Party, given their typically younger families are very progressive. And we have the best suite of policies to be able to support families, whether it's things like the Canada Child Benefit, which has lifted over 400,000 children out of poverty, or the $10 a day daycare, which can save some families, about a family of two, with 2 kids, almost $20,000 a year in Squamish. So it's a huge, huge program.
Maybe this time, and if not this time, the next time. And what I keep saying to people is that you can't lose running in the Greens because they keep shifting our way. Like everybody wants to be green. Like, you know, you hear the NDP saying, we're green. And then John Weston's running around with a green and blue tie claiming to be green conservative. You know, that's good because it means that they start shifting and actually taking our issues more seriously. So yeah, anyway, if you can, take a sign if you want one too and put one on your lawn.
In West Vancouver's Sunshine Coast, sea-to-sky country, this is Ed Watson for CPAC.